So today we want to talk about John Okello, the man, and his role in Kenyan history, the different revolutions in East Africa. So tell us about John Okello.
John Okello was a Ugandan soldier, and he had the lowest rank of a soldier, which is private. He was a private. That is the lowest rank a soldier can hold. That's where you start. And at that time, just before independence, the militaries in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, particularly just before independence, were under one command because we were British colonies. And it was called, there was these militaries, particularly the native components of militaries, was called the East African Rifles, and then King's African Rifles. So John Okello was one soldier from Uganda, and he could move freely. Soldiers were deployed freely within these countries. And as most people may know, even General Amin served in Kenya as a soldier earlier. And I think he was in Gilgil barracks. And he picked up his Swahili there very well. So soldiers from East Africa were interchanged. They could move quite well. And when the John Okello, after independence, before the reorganization of the militaries into Uganda Army, Kenya Army, the Tanzanian forces, and so on became national armies. During that reorganization, soldiers were freely moving. And John Okello found himself in Zanzibar just about the time when the native peoples, the Zanzibaris, the Africans origin, were planning to overthrow the Sultan of Zanzibar. And he helped them, he encouraged them, and he showed them how to shoot and to, in case that came. And when the coup was launched in January 1964, it became so easy. It was very easy for the Zanzibaris. Now for John Okello, after the successful attainment of independent government by the local Zanzibaris, led by the Afro-Shirazi party, they did not invite him into government. In fact, they asked him to leave. And he came to Kenya, again as a private soldier. He was a freelance soldier. And the news of the coup in Zanzibar was very exciting, particularly the freedom fighters here. They found him as a hero, although the government of the day, as well as the British, were not very amused by him. But through his contacts, he is reported to have influenced a military mutiny of the Kenya Army in a number of soldiers in Gilgil barracks. It was a short-lived rebellion, and it was accredited at that time to John Okello's presence. It was quickly suppressed, it didn't spread anywhere, and not very much is literally known about that, except the allegation that John Okello was behind it.
When was this?
1964, early 64. 64 was a very eventful year. Yes. So this is the same year after John Okello did the revolution in January. He returned to Kenya, and Kenya sent him to Uganda, back to Uganda, where Uganda jailed him. He was put in jail by the government there as a troublesome fellow. So a lot of things took place in East Africa during that time. So John Okello was put in jail, and he was forgotten. Nobody really wanted to remember him. He was regarded as undesirable, as a troublemaker, and his story, I think, would have to be, and some research would have to be done to establish what eventually happened to him.
But generally, in his time, as he was parading around, he seems to have quite an impact in military in East Africa.
Yes, he was a free going man, very friendly, and he was able to chat soldiers groups, motivate them. He had that personality, strong personality, and as things happen, history is made at very unlikely times. He happened to be in Zanzibar when these revolutionaries were planning a revolution, which is a big thing. And he is the one who encouraged them, motivated them, and told them they can do it. And the history of Zanzibar all these years with the Sultan family. The Sultan originally was ruling Zanzibar from Oman, and he had a governor and so on. And way back in 1832, the Sultan moved his palace, his base, from Oman to Zanzibar. So you can see the relationship was very old, and established himself, his seat of government in Zanzibar. And then he was rudely interrupted by a coup led by a private soldier who motivated the people of Zanzibar. And they were able to feel they could do it, and they did it. He is worth a book of his own in East African history, particularly the formation, as I mentioned, the formation of these countries, and particularly the history of Zanzibar and its association with the former Tanganyika to form Tanzania. He was key in the early stages to create Zanzibar as an independent country.
And just to go back, now first explain the difference between a coup and the mutiny, and what happened in Gilgil, what caused that?
Very few details are known about the mutiny. A mutiny is a rebellion, a localized rebellion by soldiers who refuse orders from their superiors. They refuse. And soldiers are supposed to obey any armed service, be it soldier, police, or any security, have a command structure, and their first duty is to obey. So when soldiers, for one reason or another, either through what they perceive as mistreatment or unfairness, they are not supposed to grumble. They are channels of this communication. But you see, human beings being what they are, when there is a little trouble or some little difficulty, and with a little motivation from people like John Okello, soldiers can be motivated to rebel. So a mutiny happens when a group of soldiers refuse to command, and sometimes it can be very serious if it is not put down quickly, because mutinies can spread. And some of these coups that have happened, particularly in the continent of Africa, have begun as mutinies, localized insurrection, localized disobedience. And then if it's not put down and resolved early, it can lead into some difficulties. So now a coup d'etat, again, this is the French word. Coup d'etat means blow to the state in French. Blow to the state, coup d'etat. It means the military overthrowing the existing government or the existing order and assuming control and establishing new rule through a military government. So a coup, once formed, the military takes over and imposes military rule over the civilians. And sometimes, because of political instability, and we have examples, many examples in Africa, including our neighbor, where people like me and so on have in history. We have a coup in Uganda. We have so sometimes far off countries. When a coup happens, sometimes the citizens accept it as a relief from either oppression or dictatorship. But usually a coup, when it comes, sometimes it could be disagreements and so on, but it is a military group, the army, the armed forces, taking over from civilian administration and becoming the rulers and imposing military rule in the territory of that country.
So in both cases, it's led by military.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because a mutiny always is by military or uniformed people. Now, when the civilians disobey, usually it's called a strike. They go on strike. Yes.